today. A bit of housekeeping before we start this morning. At points, we will be talking quite frankly about rape and sexual abuse. So if at any point you need to step out or step away, that is completely fine, because obviously self-care is most important. We'd also really like to thank, before we begin, all the women who contributed to this project, who shared their experiences, their opinions with us, and have been a vital piece of this work, which you're going to hear about today. So I'd really like to thank them on behalf of all of SARSAS and everybody involved in the project. We've got a few people joining us today, so I'm just going to explain a little bit about who they are, so some little introductions for you. First of all, I'm really pleased to have a pioneer researcher on violence against older women joining us this morning, Dr. Hannah Bowes from Durham University. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, hi, thanks very much for having me.
No worries, it's great that you can be here today. And also Lisa Durston, she's one of our SARSAS project officers, and she's actually the lead on our 55 plus project. And then myself, my name's Ruth, and I'm the SARSAS support and group work manager. So today we're going to be talking about sexual violence and older women, and introducing our brand new support guide for carers and supporters and practitioners, which we'll talk a little bit more about towards the end, and hopefully will be a really valuable resource for you all. There will be an opportunity to ask questions via Facebook or Zoom, and we'll be making signposting and support information available at the end. So everybody will be on mute who joins us today, but we will be collecting your questions and comments as we go along to hopefully answer at the end. And just to also make you aware that the this talk today is being recorded, so if you don't want your name or your face or anything involved, just to make sure that you're aware of that. So welcome everybody, it's really nice to see you today. I'm just going to kick us off some questions, because we don't actually have that long. So I wanted to ask Hannah and Lisa together, if that's okay. This is a groundbreaking project that SARSAS have been working on. Can you tell me a little bit about, or talk a bit about what started this, and Hannah, how you got involved in this area of research?
Do you want to kick off, Lisa, or shall I?
You can kick off, Hannah.
Okay, great. So how I got involved in the research is one of the questions that I'm asked most commonly, actually, because there is so little research in this area. One of the things that people always say is how on earth have you ended up looking at this, because it's such a niche topic, obviously. Essentially, back in 2012, I was doing a master's, a sort of generic master's in criminology at the time, but I was working as a research assistant for Nicole Westmarland, who's done a lot of work with Rape Crisis. She used to be a chair years ago, and she specialises in domestic and sexual violence research. So through my masters, and also through doing bits for Nicole as a research assistant, I sort of realized that all of the research we were looking at and we were using was really focusing on different types of violence against women, usually between the ages of 16 or 18 up to sort of around 50. And I really didn't see any research at that time that was coming out on women specifically over that age. And there wasn't really any research that even incorporated those over 50 within sort of broader studies on these topics. And that sparked an interest for me, really, as to where were these older women, because I couldn't believe that on your 50th birthday, you magically become immune to the effects of male violence, and it stops, you know, happy birthday, the domestic violence and sexual violence is no longer a problem. And so I started doing some specific digging to see if I could find any data on different forms of violence against women. And naturally, that led me to the crime survey. It used to be called the British Crime Survey. It's now the Crime Survey for England and Wales, which is our main source, really, of data nationally in England and Wales on domestic violence, sexual violence and stalking. It has a dedicated module for this, and it's been in its current form. It's existed since 2004. But what was interesting to me at the time, back in 2012, was that they had an upper age limit of 59 on that module. So it meant that we'd never actually captured any data on domestic violence, sexual violence or stalking against women over the age of 50. And that was then compounded by the fact that there were no other real sources of data on that topic. So in combination, really, of me sort of finding a bit of a gap, and also being really quite irritated that we'd imposed this upper age limit, and the justification given for it was really quite pathetic. It was that older people might not be able to use a computer, and that domestic violence is actually family violence if you're over a certain age, and therefore shouldn't be confused, which is obviously both of those things are just complete nonsense. So that's how I ended up researching in this area, really. And because there's been so little been done previously, particularly in the UK, there's so much to look at that I've sort of never stopped. I've carried on looking at different forms of violence and abuse as time has gone on, and that's sort of why I'm here today. Really, I'm really pleased to be supporting SARSAS in their pioneering work.
Thank you. And Lisa, I think that led us on to why we got involved, as well as the other rape crisis and England Wales centres that have been supporting this project overall. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the work that we've been doing?
Yeah, so thanks, Ruth. We had become aware ourselves of a gap in our knowledge and also in the representation of older women who were coming forward for our services at the same time as we became aware of Hannah's work. So we were really interested in doing a bit more work in this area. So we were really pleased when Comic Relief announced that they were going to fund a number of projects around the country to look at sexual violence against older women. So that's how we sort of started our project, where we were looking at the experiences of older women who'd experienced sexual violence at any time in their life, what the impact of that was on their lives, and then also identifying potential or possible barriers for those women in accessing support.
Brilliant. So I think that led us on to why do you think it was such an important issue in the first place? I mean, an important topic to look at. And we've got from our own work, we know why for all women and girls that we work with and everybody else who's affected by rape and sexual violence and abuse, we know why it's important, but particularly for this category of this age group category of women. So what was it that you felt made it such an important issue, and why it wasn't being talked about in the first place? I know you mentioned the crime survey, but was there anything else that you felt that had come up, either of you?
Well, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around sexual violence generally, but there's a real myth that sexual violence doesn't impact or affect older women, that they don't experience it either as an older woman or they're not impacted in experiences from earlier in their lives. You never see women, older women, represented in any of the campaign, the sort of sexual violence campaigns that we see. It always focuses on younger women, generally on a night out. Even the literature that you see in a lot of services is generally very focused around younger women. So older women are just not seeing themselves represented in any of the research, such as Hannah said, or a lot of the literature that's out there as well. So we really wanted to kind of shine a light on this issue and on those women, and really find out from working with those women what their experiences were.
Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about, Hannah, around that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that sort of the stereotypes and myths surrounding sexual violence, one of the main problems that we have in terms of tackling the lack of awareness, and by extension, therefore, the lack of support services and whatever that are available. And we've done a lot of work over the last 20, 30 years challenging those dominant stereotypes. So, most of us will probably grew up with the message of, the danger is in the streets. You must stay away from strangers. As a child, don't accept sweets from strangers. And it's that kind of message that follows through into young adulthood there, then when you're still told to avoid being on your own at night, walking home alone because it might be risky, and it's really all about this idea that rape looks a certain way. It involves a young woman, usually attractive, usually white, usually fully abled, who is at risk of being attacked by a young white, sometimes not, because there are kind of racist undertones to these stereotypes as well, who is attacked by a sort of young man on their way home from a night, or from the shopping or whatever, in the dark. And although we've got loads of research that shows us that that is not the case, in fact, that sort of real rape scenario occurs in really only 12 to 15% of reported rape. So the vast majority do not look like that. And we've done a lot of work around myth busting, you know, through our campaigns and through our awareness raising. We haven't really challenged the idea that it's a young woman who is at the centre of most sexual violence or sexual assault incidents. And actually that persists, and as Lisa says, we still feature young women heavily in our campaign materials, or even if we don't directly, we talk about contexts in which young women are most likely to be, so university campuses or bars and nightclubs, and we locate the dangers within those specific areas. And that is then also compounded by the fact that separately, but interlinked, we see aging as a process of decay and decline, particularly for women. Their sort of sexuality and their value is very much associated with their youth. And in fact, the entire sort of pharmaceutical and beauty industry is based on this idea that to be young is to be beautiful, and that women should at the very least defer aging for as long as possible. Yeah, but ideally actively avoid reaching that stage as well by buying all these products and whatever. So it's again inbuilt into us that youthfulness is attractive, that young women are sexy, and separately the rape myths that exist really position sexual violence to be a result of sexual desirability. You know, men can't control their urges. That's why when they see a young woman walking home on their own wearing a skirt, you know, oh, they can't help themselves but rape them. And we know that's nonsense, but actually we see that subtly these messages still exist, they still persist, and unfortunately we still reproduce those messages through our campaigns, through our even well-intentioned sometimes, through our research, by not looking at this group. All of that contributes to this invisibility of older women, and it makes them look like unlikely victims, and then it becomes much harder for them to be believed when they do come forward. So there are so many sort of different issues really that interconnect here.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back as well when you're talking about the myths. You were making me think about how there was a time when, and still, and it was told to all of us that, you know, you're probably safe once you were married. Let's get our daughter, let's get her married off, and she'll be in some, you know, safe hands, etc. So they can focus on making sure we look after and protect younger women and girls. And it's that if you feel that once I'm in this marriage and I'm now safe, etc., it's also going to be hard for the women themselves to believe what's happened to them. I could imagine, and some of the conversations that we had where it might not have seemed serious enough for it to be happening within marriage, rape particularly. Elisa, I know you spoke to a few women more about that, about the language they were using around that.
Yeah, and actually just to go back as well to your point about that idea of safety within marriage, in the research that we did, the majority of women who'd been raped or sexually assaulted had been raped or sexually assaulted by a partner or ex-partner or a spouse. So bearing that in mind, with also the fact that rape within marriage was only made a crime in England in 1991, that's a lot of different messages for women from some previous generations to be internalizing and trying to identify whether or not their experiences even, you know, whether they even recognize those experiences as being abusive.
Okay, so that leads us on to me wanting to know a bit, and our viewers today want to know a bit more about what would you both, what's out of this research and the work that we've done, what would you both like to see the big changes be, and the impacts, positive impacts this project and work could bring? Are there any particular areas that we'd really like to highlight?
So are you right if I go first, Hannah? I think for us at SARSAS and with the other centres that we worked with across the Southwest as part of this project, so many of the women that we spoke to and worked with, like you mentioned before, Ruth, talked about how they really viewed what had happened to them as not being serious enough to come forward for support. They very much had internalised messages of things being different in the past. Sexual violence was often far more normalised and downplayed or not really talked about, even more so than now. And so they've just kind of you know, packed that away and felt that really they should be over it all by now. So really what we'd like to see change is for women of any age. It doesn't matter, you know, what age you are, when it happened. We know that the experience of sexual violence can be absolutely devastating. It's not any less because it happened 50 years ago. So we just want to let women know that there is support for them, and that they deserve that support.
Thank you, Lisa. Did you want to add to that, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, we're at such an early stage in terms of evidence and knowledge, and one of the key things that we don't know much about are women's experiences, you know, and they, whilst there's sort of research being done and emerging, it's still very much in its infancy. So I think what we need to be doing is sort of starting these conversations, really, offering the services, but very much listening to older women about their experiences, about what they need, because the problem, aside from the fact that we've not had the data, so we don't actually know how much of a problem this is and what sexual violence against older people might look like and whether it differs at all to younger people in terms of risk factors and characteristics and things. All of that is a problem just for our general knowledge. But it's also particularly problematic when we think about service delivery and provision of support for older women, because we have built all of our services on the needs, the characteristics, what we know about younger women, because that's all we've had available. And the assumption that we can just map those on to different age groups and that they will fit and they will work is probably unlikely. So we really need to be developing those services from a grassroots perspective, using knowledge as it becomes available and building that in. So we need to be very flexible, I think. So as one example, we know that for women experiencing domestic violence, which of course can include sexual assaults, and as Lisa's already said, often, in fact, most sexual assaults are occurring within a relationship. We know that older women are more likely to want to stay in the relationship for various reasons. Sometimes it might be that they feel they have to, and sometimes it might be for whatever reason that they want to. Potentially some of those generational norms that you've talked about, you know, coming into play there. So if we build all of our services on the model of you trying to get a woman out of a relationship and trying to get them to leave, then all of a sudden they won't be available and applicable to older women. So I think we have to think carefully about what is available and actually making sure that we're integrating the evidence as it becomes available to us, and really making sure that women and their experiences are at the heart of anything that we do. And I think that's what's so great about SARSAS, that they've been doing research alongside the development of services so that one can feed into the other, which is how it has to be, because we just don't have enough evidence at the moment to say this is exactly how we should be doing this, you know, and it will work first time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Hannah. This has led us really nicely onto, I'd like Lisa to talk a little bit about one of the many tools that have come out of the project we'd like to launch today, and for you to be aware that it will be available afterwards from the SARSAS website. And that's our new 55 plus guide. Lisa, if you could just tell us a little bit more about that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. So we're really pleased to launch it today. We've been working on it for a number of months now, and we've produced it in consultation with professionals who work with older women, but also through sort of feedback from older women themselves. So we've really made sure that we're kind of listening to all the people that it's intended to support. One of the other outcomes that we're really hoping to achieve with this project is to be able to support people who might work with older women, and really try and increase their knowledge and awareness of both the impact of sexual violence on older women, but also how they can respond or help support somebody who might have experienced sexual violence. So we're really pleased to launch a guide which gives information on recognising some of the signs and symptoms of trauma, the impact that might have on older women, and then how they might be able to respond in the best possible way to that.
Excellent. And how will people be able to get hold of it, Lisa, when they want to?
So it will be available today on our website. We'll also be sharing the link through all of our social media, and we can post the link in the chat on Zoom as well at the end of this session.
Thank you. Yeah, really, really excited for that. And it'd be really lovely to hear from anyone today after this is finished. If you go on and have a look at the site or have a look at the booklet, to let us know your thoughts on that. And if you use it, in fact, that would be even better to know how it went and if it was helpful for you, which we really hope it will be. We do have time for a few questions. I've got one which I know has been fielded by one of our staff members. There's one question that's come up saying, it's from Sarah, thank you. Is financial dependency a factor for older women, either not wanting to report or withdrawing from initial complaints? Is that something that either of you have come across?
Yes, so it definitely can be. So as Hannah talked about, there's a number of reasons why women might not want to leave a situation that they're in. And one of those, you know, if they're in an abusive situation, one of those reasons might be that they are dependent on the person that's abusing them for financially, or maybe for care needs, or, you know, that's where their whole support network are. So there's a number of reasons that they might not want to leave their situation, and financial dependency is definitely one of those.
Excellent. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, we know financial dependency is an issue for younger women as well. So, and I think that's the other thing to remember, that a lot of the risk factors, the characteristics, the issues that we see with older women will sort of mirror some of what is experienced in younger life as well. It's not that sexual violence against older people is this brand new phenomenon that, you know, it looks completely different and only exists after a certain age. And in fact, that's one of the problems with the way in which we currently approach sexual violence and other types of violence against older women. And this is what one of the things SARSAS has tackled in their guide, which I'm really pleased about, which is that we tend to frame it as something different. We call it elder abuse, and really what that serves to do is just obscure the nature of what the problem is, because this isn't an elder issue. It's not a problem that is associated with age. We see most of the same characteristics all the way through. And some of the reasons for staying remain the same. So financial dependency in younger life is often a reason for staying in relationships as well, because you simply don't have the means to be able to get out of there. That said, we know that specific social and personal characteristics can alter the way in which we experience violence and abuse, and our reasons for staying or leaving and so on. So it may well be that financial abuse is exacerbated for some older people because of their generation. So if I think about my own grandma, she's never had a bank account. The money has always gone into, she's never worked, the money has always gone into her husband, my granddad's bank account. And so she simply has no access to money if it doesn't come through him. So if she wanted to leave that relationship, it would be very difficult. That might be less likely to be the case with some younger groups, although there will still be some younger women who experience that as well. But we just see that age can create potentially exacerbate existing challenges, or it might kind of mean that they manifest slightly differently. But what we shouldn't be doing is assuming that this is a whole different issue, you know, and that older women experience sexual violence in completely different ways to younger women, because actually in most cases the same risk factors hold true across the life course.
Thank you. We haven't got no further questions have come forward, unless anyone is out there listening today or has one for us. So while there's a lovely comment, thank you. Can I read out comments? It's so lovely. I'd like to. This says, this is a great charity that works on financial abuse linked to sexual violence and domestic abuse, called SEA, Surviving Economic Abuse. Yeah, so that's really good for us all to know that that's out there. I just want to finish off, if that's okay, with some further information. Just that we will be putting a slide at the end for you to see that if you felt like any of this has brought anything up for any of you, or you wanted to seek extra help, or you needed to talk to anyone. And as well as that, from our point of view, we'll also be running more of these Facebook Lives events, because this, just to add, was our first. And starting with a brilliant project that we're going to be looking at from the 25th of November, which will be our Learning Disabilities and Autism project at SARSAS. So we're hopefully going to be looking at the amazing work that team has done over the week commencing the 25th. And it would be lovely to see as many of you there as possible. And thank you today for coming along. That would be great. Oh, there's one more question just come through. Just going to try and get it in while we can. What was the age range of the women you worked with? That's a really interesting question, actually.
So for our project, it was 55 and over. That was identified as the age where women became less represented in services. The term older women, there's varying ideas around what constitutes older. For some places it starts at 50. I think the World Health Organization sets it at 60, but our work looked specifically at women 55 and over, and I know Hannah's work included a different age range.
Yeah, mine tends to be 60 and over, just because the crime survey cutoff was 59, although I should say that that was increased to 74 in 2017. So we are now starting to get data through on different forms of violence against women between and men between 60 and 74, but obviously that still excludes some older people. The average age expectancy is 84, I think, for women. And it excludes care homes and other institutions, including refuges as well. So people that are living in those are never included in the survey. So yeah, 60 and over has always been the starting point for me. But like you said, there are huge problems, and of course that's one of the other issues. I mean, elder abuse, you know, within that contains the word elder, but elder, older, senior, elderly. You know, how do we define those terms? Chronological age isn't particularly useful actually in doing that. It often serves to stigmatize groups even more actually. Yeah, it's referred to as an age-old problem. What is elderly, what is older? So there are definitely debates about that, which I won't bore everybody with now, but you know, I can happily rant on it at length about.
Brilliant. Can I just ask, just as we finish, was when you were talking to women, Hannah and Lisa, who informed this work and the research that you've done, Hannah, what was their response? Was there any themes in their response to being asked in the first place? Was someone actually highlighting this to them and bring it to attention? What type of responses did you used to get?
I'll let you start, Lisa.
Okay. But the women that came forward were really pleased that we were actually looking at this issue. I think there was obviously a lot of women that didn't come forward or didn't want to talk about it, which is completely somebody's choice, and we would never expect somebody to talk about or disclose an experience that they didn't want to. But there definitely was a feeling almost of relief, I'd say, amongst some of the women that we talked to, that we were finally looking at this issue, and that they were allowed almost to talk about their experience and have that experience validated and believed.